Hi all, and welcome back to another book review. This one is for the second book I've read this year, and it's called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I saw this on a lot of lists of the top books to read, and it was actually the winner for 2022's Choice Awards on Goodreads for fiction. I'm usually deterred from books that make lists like this because, at the risk of sounding pretentious, I generally don't like the same stuff mainstream readers like. That's mostly because I'm drawn to the weird stuff more often than not, as you've seen in my other videos. And in my first review, I mentioned that some of the books I've read this year so far have become some of my all-time favorites, and spoiler alert, this is one of those books. It's my absolute favorite book of 2025 so far. Let me explain. The novel centers around two people who have something in common. They love playing video games, especially Donkey Kong, and that's how they met. Our male protagonist, Sam, is in the hospital recovering from a car accident that actually killed his mother, and I promise that's not a spoiler. We find that out pretty quickly. But the foot injury that he got from that accident becomes a lifelong struggle for him, even though he tries so hard not to let it. And our female protagonist, Sadie, is in that same hospital visiting her older sister who's receiving cancer treatments. Now, because of Sam's very real and very recent trauma, he hasn't really talked to anybody for weeks until Sadie goes in there and starts playing the video game with him. And from that point on, they become inseparable until something happens. Years pass without them speaking, but they do end up going to colleges pretty near each other on the East Coast, Sam at Harvard and Sadie at MIT. And then one day they see each other randomly on the subway. Sadie says that she's studying video game design, and Sam says that he's studying computer programming. And because of their mutual love of video games, Sadie asks Sam to playtest one that she's created about the Holocaust. Sounds fun. But after Sadie's married boyfriend, who's also her professor, says that he won't leave his wife for her, shocker, she becomes so depressed that she basically stops caring for herself. So Sam visits her one day in an effort to make her feel better, which I thought was a great parallel to Sadie visiting Sam in the hospital at the beginning of the novel. And after a while, they decide to create a game together. They ultimately end up also starting their own gaming studio called Unfair Games with Sam's roommate Marks, and they grow their friendship as well as their business. Now, I'm skipping a ton of details here because what I loved so much about this novel is the characterizations and the realistic ups and downs we see them go through as we meet them as children and then see them grow into adults. A couple of other characters play a large role in their relationship, and I'm purposefully leaving this vague because I actually did cry at one point in the novel and had to put it down for like 2 days. I felt every single emotion that exists while reading this book, and that hardly happens. And when I finished the book, I had that super rare feeling that I've only had a handful of times where I wanted to shout from the roof of my house how great it was. The only other more recent time I've felt that way was when I read We Cast a Shadow by Maurice Carlos Ruffin. Please go check that one out too. So with that, my recommendation is, clearly, devour it. Nom 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 nom, give me a bib. Now, you're probably thinking, man, she loves all of these books. There's only been one doo-doo book so far, but I promise I've just gotten that lucky. They're not all this glorious. And as a gamer myself, I appreciated the gaming plotline of the book, but I will say if you're not a gamer, you'll still really enjoy it, I promise. It was smartly written, never too emotional, never too technical, and I loved how the story twisted and became something completely different as the chapters went on. Zevin, in my opinion, is masterful at using time and perspectives. She writes intellectually, but not pretentiously. I really could not put this book down until I had to. I wish it had been around when I was still teaching AP English because I would have loved to share this with my teenage students. So until the next one, thanks so much for coming. Now, go read something.